The case of Ruby Franke, the YouTuber mum who was sent to prison in 2024 for abusing her kids, shocked the internet. For years, viewers had watched a suburban family life on the Channel 8 Passengers before discovering a horrific case of child abuse happening behind closed doors. The outrage we all feel when we hear about these extreme cases where there's child victims is one of disbelief and shock. Why did this happen? How could somebody do this? Ultimately, we feel a sense of relief and justice when the offender is found guilty and sentenced and punished with a prison sentence. But as a criminologist of 20 years, what shocks me isn't just these most extreme cases which end up in a prison sentence and a true crime documentary. It's also what's happening every single day on millions of family and parenting social media accounts. This is from your huge family influencer, family vlogger type accounts, but also the everyday posting of parents all around. It's not necessarily crime in the way we might understand it, like in the example of the Ruby Franke case, but it's a more subtle, hidden harm, one that we aren't really talking about enough. This is something called sharenting. Sharenting is just a casual way to describe parents and families sharing about their kids online, posts, videos, images, information. Its early use was basically to mock people for oversharing about their kids online. Think of all those first day of term pictures or little Charlie's nursery graduation pictures, the ones which our feeds get flooded with at certain times of year every year. But in 2026, we've got government safety warnings to parents advising them that they shouldn't be posting images and videos of their under 16s online. This particularly relates to concerns around cyber criminals and child exploitation and the misuse of these images. But it's also linked to how the internet is changing. Criminology has been paying attention to sharenting for a little while now, and back in January 2025 there was a chapter published in a book by a group of criminologists who came together to bring their various research expertise to talk about sharenting in terms of the risks and the harms it could cause. In this chapter, they also talked about how this is something which is enabled by social media platforms. The authors created a diagram which mapped the risks and harms of sharenting, and I'm going to put that on the screen so you can have a look. But in this video, I don't actually want to look at cyber criminals and child exploitation rings or the illegal use of child images. Because in this case, there's a very clear and identifiable set of offenders or criminals. There's also a very clear victim, the child. And so this fits neatly into the victim and offender narrative, which is quite normal within criminology and true crime kind of discourse. The main thing is that these offenders and criminals can be processed by our criminal justice system. They can go to court, they can be sent to prison, they can be punished under criminal law. But when it comes to typical parents sharing images and videos of their kids online, in terms of criminology, the obvious concern sits with somebody getting hold of that image and using it in a way which it wasn't intended for. With your bigger family influencer or vlogger style accounts, where there tends to be concerns, it's around particular exploitation of the child, like in the case of Ruby Franke, how the parents are neglecting or abusing children, both with the everyday person and the bigger family style content creators here. In both those examples I've just given, the traditional criminological point is that there is an identifiable offender or person committing harm. There's the obvious individual baddie in these cases, or maybe a couple of baddies. And there's also the obvious victim as well, the innocent victim, the child. There's perhaps one or two offenders or criminals doing things which are breaking the criminal law. There's no question or confusion around these incidents being a crime or a problem. We can explain these with our traditional criminology understandings, and these are the kind of things which are covered really well by true crime documentaries. But I want to investigate where criminal law doesn't protect children from harm, or where things are much less clear-cut about whether it is a crime or not. So I'm going to call this hidden harm. But before we investigate this hidden harm, I want to take a little history detour back to the Osbournes, who started on MTV in 2002. Here we saw viewers invited into the home of Sharon, Ozzy, Kelly and Jack to see the chaos of their everyday family life. It became one of our most watched shows of the 2000s. It was a true piece of pop culture history, cult TV. And TV execs realised the potential for financial profit through honing in on the everyday family life of a chaotic celebrity family. However, it wasn't so smooth sailing for the kids. Now, I mentioned Jack and Kelly, but there was actually another daughter, Amy, who at 16 moved out of the family home because she didn't want to be part of the reality TV show because it would risk her privacy and her identity. But the intense public scrutiny with the 24/7 recording and focus on Jack and Kelly, who were part of this series, has been said to have an impact on their psychological well-being. And this was the start of important questions being raised around children's rights, but also around the corporate ownership of family life. Continuing with our history, but going forward in time a bit, the Kardashians took this idea and blew it up. Kris Jenner, the mum, wasn't just a TV star, she was the influencer for every YouTube mum and parent who has come since. Unlike the Osbournes, who were essentially owned by MTV, the Kardashians built their own empire. Their parents were the CEOs, the directors of their empire, to monetize their lives as families, but also as individuals, particularly the children. Now, whilst we as the public talk about these kind of telly shows as trash TV or the stuff we watch when we just want to relax and unwind, what they're really showing is how corporate economic interests have cottoned on to the fact that families and family life can make lots of money. This money made through kids' lives and family can be made even despite the risks around the exposure and scrutiny on the children. Enter social media, where anyone with a smartphone or a camera can create content. Gone are the days when you need to pitch an idea to a TV channel when you can just set up your own YouTube channel. Anyone and everyone with access to a phone and the internet can commodify their lives to make money from it. This allows the blueprint, which we can see, which enabled the case of Ruby Franke to even happen in the first place. It is this concept which I think is important for my investigation into the hidden harms of sharenting. There's 3 related strands I want you to remember. The first is the desire from consumers, us as the general public, to view and to engage with this content. 2, a recognition by brands and companies that this kind of content can sell products. And the third are tech platforms which enable us to produce and consume content however we choose. Let's go back to the criminologist who wrote the chapter on sharenting I mentioned earlier. They use quite a complicated academic definition to describe sharenting. A socio-technical practice encompassing social dynamics, the actions of sharenters in posting child-centric data, and technical dimensions, the actions of platform technologies in inviting and facilitating both the practice and associated data harms. But all this long explanation really boils down to is that we need to understand that the humans who view and consume the content exist alongside the technology which allows this content to be produced and shared. Traditional criminological definition is a helpful way to think about it, but I think there's a missing part of the puzzle here if we want to identify the hidden harms, but also how we can better regulate and protect children from hidden harm. So my additional question then would be, what role does culture and economy play in sharenting? And this is where our history tour back to the Osbournes and Kardashians can help us answer this question. Remember how I said that they taught brands and companies how financially lucrative family life could be? Well, this was firmly whipped up as soon as brands and companies discovered influencer marketing. And remember, the whole point of influencer marketing is that we don't realise we're being sold things. We're just watching our favourite family vlogger or favourite influencer talking about their life or their family or what their children have been up to. And this is why brands love it so much, because we don't feel like we're being marketed to, so we're much more likely to buy into the products through this style of marketing. This is why brands spend so much money on influencer marketing, because it pays off. But we need to talk about children and young people in this context. They are being used as commodities that can be monetized. This comes at the expense of their privacy, their security, and also their informed consent. Now, there's already a fab growing number of YouTube creators who are making really interesting analytical deep dives into specific family influencer channels and related content. And if you want specific analysis into some of these family vloggers and influencers who are commodifying family life and being really successful with it, then I've really enjoyed discovering creators like Hannah Alonso and Behind the Screen. They do incredibly detailed deep dives on specific examples or issues, which if you want to learn more about, I'd really recommend checking them out. But as an academic who's interested in everyday hidden harms, I'm less interested in these family influencer, these big creator style accounts. I want to broaden this to thinking about everybody who's using their public social media accounts to post information about their kids online. Why? Because social media in 2026 is an AI algorithm driven place to be. What you see in your feed and how many people view your posts is determined by the platform logics, the platform algorithms. And because of this, we've been manipulated to optimize our content so it performs the best, so more people see it. And I'm not just talking about content creators here, because gone are the days when our social media newsfeed is mostly made up by people we actively choose to follow. These days, it's all about maximizing engagement to increase your visibility and reach. This is partly to do with the way social media has become a place to sell things rather than just to share pictures. One thing that's worth noting is that there is some evidence to suggest that family content which features daughters are mostly around the age of 11 to 15 tends to attract higher rates of brand sponsorship, of deals, and also, importantly for this video, engagement. And sometimes that's negative engagement about people saying you shouldn't be posting about your daughter in this way. And other times it's creepy old men posting really inappropriate comments. And this is something which some big family vloggers have been criticised for, but yet they seem to know this and continue to do it. So there's lots of questions around ethics and risk to children in this case. But for all parents who are sharing about their family life and their kids online, whether they're trying to make money from it or not, we have to remember that we are literally penalised by platforms if people don't engage or share our content. It just doesn't get shown any further. So we're all rewarded by creating content that is highly clickable, shareable, or engaging. It makes you want to comment on it, even if you're commenting because you're pissed off about it. So whether we like it or not, everybody who's using public social media accounts is playing the metrics game. All of a sudden, our children's lives, images, voices are being splashed everywhere online. But now it's not just the people who are preying on child's images we need to worry about, the kind of people who we traditionally would be worried about as criminologists. These exact images, details about a child's life, such as their habits, their disabilities, their health, their conditions, their friends, their location, the school they go to, their achievements, their likes, their dislikes, their features are all being used to train generative AI. This is the same generative AI which is wildly unregulated, really poorly understood, and constantly changing. This is hosted on platforms where we barely read the terms and conditions, and even if we do try to figure them out, they change so often we're not even aware when something gets changed. Generative AI is being promoted and driven by big tech and a small group of billionaires. They got rich through exploiting our data and continue to do so, but also our children's data. Yet these are the same children governments like the UK government, Australia, are saying are too at risk on social media because they are too vulnerable and we should protect their childhood. We should ban them from using it. Make it make sense. We're in a situation where we've got governments blaming the kids. Kids are probably blaming the parents. And when we do identify an issue, we tend to blame it on an individual who we can hold up as the problem or the offender, but not question the rest of the system. This means that we're completely ignoring the multi-billion corporate tech platforms which are actually enabling and perpetuating the harms. Going back to my opening point about Ruby Franke and the extreme case of child abuse and neglect, which resulted in a prison sentence and a true crime documentary, these are only telling us a really small amount about crime and harm happening in society. But because we're obsessed with focusing on these extreme cases, we're missing the slow burning, the more subtle, the more hidden everyday harms, which actually have the potential for far-reaching greater consequences and potentially huge numbers of victims, which we're not even aware of yet. So if we think back to the question, should sharenting be a crime? Then my answer would actually be no, because I think that criminalising parents is just another way to scapegoat particular individuals. The problem with this is by focusing on particular individuals as if they're some kind of baddie, we're not looking at the multi-billion-pound tech industry which is enabling this and which is creating the harms. And also, if we're going to criminalise parents, we can't put your everyday parent who's just casually sharing the occasional image or milestone or achievement or the disability or illness of their child as general updates compared to the family vloggers and influencers who have thousands of followers across huge channels who are actively monetizing their children. There's different sets of issues going on here, but criminalization isn't necessarily a solution to this problem. In a bit of a similar way to I've previously argued how a social media ban for under 16s doesn't necessarily protect kids from harm. That's not to say that better protection for children and children's rights and safety isn't needed in all cases of sharenting. But when we step back, what worries me is that if we allow ourselves to be driven by an individual offender or baddie type understanding, no one's questioning whether the offenders are the ones who sit behind the platforms in big tech who are getting rich and exploiting our data and just getting away with it because nobody is asking the right questions. So rather than asking, should sharenting be criminalised, why don't we start asking whether should social media platforms be safer? Next week, I'm going to be looking at the same issues around corporate exploitation, but from a completely different angle. I'm going to head into the lifestyle coaching and the wellness industry, exposing how unqualified gurus use their wisdom flexing or wellness supplements to monetize your insecurity and vulnerabilities, and how the tech platforms allow white-collar crime regulations to be got around. Make sure you click now to subscribe so that you don't miss the next instalment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.